This screencast focuses on adding questions and the different question types. We will also address how to make this document into a quiz so that it will grade itself. The first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and create this document into a quiz because I would like for it to generate its own responses and tally whether or not the responses are correct. In order to do this, I'm going to go over to the right hand side and click on the gear. It opens up the box for the settings. Within here, I'm going to go over to quizzes and select make this a quiz. This will automatically begin to give you the option to select the correct answer so that the form can tally its own grades. I'm going to click save. Now I'm going to begin to add questions. Within Google Forms, there are several different question types that you can add. The first thing you typically want to know is the student's name. So I'm going to select on Untitled Question, and it automatically selects this entire section. It adds some more drop-down components, and it highlights the question that I'm going to start typing. I'm going to type name. And what you will notice is automatically it changed my question type. It automatically knew that more than likely I'm going to want the student to type their name. Therefore, it changed my option to a short answer response. I typically tend to select required. That way students cannot skip this section and it will require them to do something before moving on. I want to add another section where I know the teacher. For example, several classes may switch. You may have several periods in one day, so you want to know your homeroom teacher or the period. So I want to add another question. In order to add another question, I'm going to select this plus sign that's over here in the circle, and it says add question. You automatically get another box that appears. Now, let's look at the different types of questions that you can add. Multiple choice, let's open this up. We have short answer, which was the type where we did for the name. You're going to type in your response. Paragraph is very similar. It just tends to give more space for the person to respond. Now remember, whenever you create short answer or paragraph questions, you will have to go back and grade those questions yourself, as the computer does not automatically generate those responses. Multiple choice is self-explanatory. Check boxes I typically use when I would like for my student or user to select more than one answer. Drop down is where all of the answers will drop down from this tiny arrow. I tend not to use this with primary grades due to the fact that this step is a little more complicated. However, you're welcome to do so. Linear scale is great for surveys. This is similar to when you would like someone to agree, somewhat agree, slightly disagree. Those types of questions are what I use linear scale. I'm going to skip multiple choice grid for right now because that's more of an advanced concept. You also can add date and time. Now please note that the date and time that this form is completed will automatically be added to their timestamp. However, these two types of questions are similar to if you would like someone to sign up for a specific time. For example, say that you're hosting conferences and you would like to know the best dates available or the best time available for a parent. That's when you would add these types of questions. It's not asking when did you take this assessment, it's asking when would something be best for you, at what date or what time would something be best for you. All right, with that being said, because my original concern was finding out the teacher name, I like to select multiple choice. I'm going to click in the box where it says question. Remember that it will automatically highlight what you need to do. I type in the name teacher. I'm going to go back. It thinks that I want to do a drop down, but I do not. So I'm going to go back and select multiple choice. I like to type in the teacher's names and let the person choose the teacher as opposed to type it in. Sometimes when students type in the name, you'll get different spellings, and when it comes to sorting that information in a spreadsheet, it's a lot harder. So it's easier if you just go ahead and type the teacher's name. All right, so I have my two major questions. Also remember to select required. If not, the students will be able to skip over this section. So I know who's taking this test and I know which classroom they came from. So now I'm ready to go ahead and start my questions. One thing that I like to do is add a section. I like for each one of my questions to come up on a page by itself so that it's not too overwhelming for the students. So in order to make a new section, which means putting a new page onto my Google form, I go to the right and I click the two parallel lines, which is Add Section. I'll scroll down and you'll see this section that appears here. You also see the description that you see is also optional. Sometimes I might have questions that require a part A and part B. I tend to write those type of descriptions in this section. So for my first question, I usually write question 1. Now I need to add my actual question. So remember, to add a question, you go over to the plus sign, select it, and I'm going to give my first question. I suggest putting a number 1 just for aesthetic purposes and for later use, and then type in your question. I'm also going to keep this as a multiple choice question because I want to get my data very specific later. I don't want this to be an extended response. So I'm going to give them options. In order to give them options, you simply click on option and it automatically allows you to select in that box. I also suggest adding A, B, C, D, and so on as you add your responses because it makes it a little easier for the students to read and use later. Now that I have added my responses, I also want to make this question required so that the students cannot move forward without answering the question. And you go forward and add questions in the same way. You also, because we have already made this into a quiz, if you select answer key, you can allot the number of points. I typically only allot 1 point because it will give you the same percentage regardless. And then you select your actual answer. So my correct answer is C, and I move on. In order to add another question, remember that we're going to add a section first so that each question will show up on a page by itself. In order to add its own section, you go over to the parallel lines, add a section, and you continue forth this in the same manner. Question 2, add the actual question. Remember to put a number first. Also, these dots that are showing up on the left-hand side of each one of the questions allow you to move the question up and down if you want to reorder your responses. You can also click the X if you no longer want that response. Adding other, be mindful of what that really means. When you're adding other, you're giving your user an option to type in whatever response they would like to give. For example, say you're doing some type of survey and you've given some options, but you also want to know what other item they may want to add. If you click add other, it gives them this option to type in their own response. So be mindful when you press the button add other. That's what it's actually saying. You may select required. Also remember to answer the question. Give it some allotted points. Select your correct response. And you can continue moving forward in the same way to add new questions.